What's up, you guys? We're talking UFC Seattle, a card that's really taken some hits. Matter of fact, right before I started recording this, it looks like we just lost another fight. My sources are pointing towards Edson Barbosa pulling out of his fight with Steve Garcia. It hasn't been officially announced thus far. Other than that, we lost a big heavyweight match between Curtis Blades and Rizvan Kuniev. If you remember Kuniev, one of the more promising heavyweight fighters who was signed through Dana White's Contender Series. He came over from the PFL. That fight has been rescheduled for UFC 313. That will be on that big Ankalaev versus Pereira fight card there. So at least we'll get to see that take place. Other than that, unfortunately, we did lose the Dominic Cruz versus Rob Font fight. Cruz gets injured once again. It forces him into retirement, and I just got to tip my hat to old Cruz there. One of the greatest to ever do it. I had him marked as the greatest bantamweight fighter for quite a while. Even when a lot of you guys were saying Aljamain Sterling passed him up, I was not in agreement there. At this point in time, I think we would have to say Merab Dvalishvili is the greatest bantamweight to have ever done it. I mean, when you take a look at the work that he has been putting in over the last year or two specifically, I think he surpasses all of them. Now, we still do have some exciting matchups throughout the card, so stick with me here, guys. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, please. Guys, all hit that like button. It means a lot to me. We're going to start with the first fight and work our way up towards the top of this card. If you want to know what's on the line in the main event, I mean, first and foremost, Henry Cejudo's career is probably on the line, because if he loses this fight, I would feel pretty confident that he eases into retirement. If he gets a win here over the young and primed Yadong Song, you definitely would see Cejudo pushing for another big fight after that. So a lot on the line here. And when you take a look at the bantamweight division, right, Merab, right, he's reigning supreme in this division. There's nobody that's really solidified as his next opponent. Sugar Sean O'Malley is coming off that loss to Merab. To me, it doesn't make sense that he gets an immediate rematch at the title. I would actually like to see Sean O'Malley face off with Corey Sandhagen, who Sandhagen's also coming off a loss, which was against Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar Nurmagomedov just came off that loss against Merab. It's kind of crazy. When you take a look at the top of the bantamweight division, there's so many fighters that are actually coming off losses. All right, once upon a time, the bantamweight division, in my eyes, was one of the deepest and most thriving divisions. I used to always make fun of the middleweight division. Nowadays, the middleweight division is thriving, and the bantamweight division, it needs to really pick it up. It's tough right now. You got Davison Figueiredo coming off that loss against Petr Yan. Petr Yan is probably the X factor, right? He's one of those fighters that right now has a nice little winning streak going on. He's in a 2-fight winning streak after taking out Yadong Song and Davison Figueiredo. The only issue is yeah, he pretty much got ragdolled against Merab. So did Cejudo when he faced off against Merab. So it's really tough to say who's going to be next. And comment below, guys, who do you feel should be the next opponent for Merab? And you guys can elaborate on that, right? Saying like this fighter needs to get this win and then he would be next. However you want to go with that. Who is going to be the next fighter to face off with Merab? I'm curious what you guys think there, all right? So won't hold you guys up any longer. We're going to ease into the first fight. Just want to say real quick, if anyone's looking to work with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out. You could shoot me a DM on Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller, or shoot me a DM on Twitter at the MMA Teller, or you can email me at MMAFortuneTeller@gmail.com. Go shoot me a follow on all that social media over there, and we'll jump into the first fight right now.
The Teller.
In the welterweight division, we have Adam Fugitt taking on Billy Ray Goff. This was a fight that was recently put together as both fighters lost their initial opponents. Goff was supposed to be fighting on that Rodriguez versus Cannonier fight card that took place last week. So he was training for a fight that was only set to take place a week prior. It's not like he's hopping off the couch or anything like that. He should be in good condition. Adam Fugitt was supposed to be taking on Islam Dolatov, right? That fight was scheduled for the date. Dolatov, he's a fighter that I hold in higher regard than anyone we're going to be talking about in this segment, just to understand who Fugitt was training for. Dolatov, one of the top prospects that was signed from this past season of Dana White's Contender Series. Now, this should be an interesting clash here. There's some contrast between these two fighters. Fugitt is a decade older than Goff, and Fugitt has shown to like to fight from the outside. He has a very heavy kicking attack, while on the other hand, Billy Goff is a big pressure fighter and likes to mix in the boxing. We saw that in his last fight as he came up a little bit short against Trey Waters. That was a very fun fight. You got to give Goff credit, though, man. He was constantly pressuring throughout that fight, just looking to land big shots. And I think that Goff is going to prove to be a very entertaining fighter for years to come. Fugitt, he's a fighter that's really overlooked. All right, when you take a look at him, and we're going to get to the betting line for this fight in a second, which he is a big underdog. Fugitt doesn't get a lot of respect, and I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. You take a look at his resume, right? He's 10-4 as a pro. If you look at all of his losses, they're all somewhat respectable losses. He did get subbed against Mike Malott, who's a talented kid. He lost to Michael Morales via KO in the third round. Michael Morales, one of the dark horses of the division. He lost to Kalen Hill. Now, Kalen Hill, I think he's only 4-2 as a pro. He retired early. But Kalen Hill is a fighter. You take a look at his 2 losses. They came by way of respectable opponents. And Kalen Hill was once thought to be one of the more promising fighters, right? He fought on Dana White's Contender Series. He has some talent. Okay, so he did lose there. His other loss was against Austin Vanderford. He was wrestled up in that one. But besides those blemishes, he has shown up and got his hand raised in some interesting spots, right? When you think about the KO victory he had over Solomon Renfro, a respected fighter on the regional scene outside the UFC. You guys know his story. He went out there, finished him up in the first round. He got his first ever UFC victory with a first round KO victory over Yasaku Kinoshita. Now that's a common opponent of Billy Goff's. Billy Goff also had his first ever UFC victory against Kinoshita. He also finished him up with strikes. And then that will just bring us to his last fight where he defeated Josh Quinlan, which was a competitive fight. And it was really the kicking game that separated him from Quinlan in that spot. So the reason why I was just kind of highlighting some of his losses, I think it's hard to put our finger on exactly who Fugitt is as a fighter. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's going to make a run in this division, but I'm not necessarily sure if he's a bad fighter or if his line should be where it is, especially against a fighter in Billy Goff, who, although he is entertaining, he's 9-3 as a pro. He's still young. There's going to be some growing pains going on with him. We saw in that Trey Waters fight that although he pushed the pace and landed a lot of strikes, right? He landed 129 strikes in that fight. Okay, he was landed on a lot as well. Okay, he got hit with 107 strikes, and really, he was being landed on more cleanly. If you guys remember, Trey Waters was bobbing and weaving, and he was really tagging him up with his hands. So I do have question marks about Goff's defensive skills. What he has going for him here is that Fugitt hasn't really shown a lot with his offensive boxing. Like I said earlier, he favors his kicks a lot. The key to this fight is going to be, can Fugitt keep this fight on the outside? Can he circle and use his footwork to land those kicks at bay and to use his reach advantage? Okay, he's a longer fighter here. If he can do that, I think he could have a lot of success in this fight. If Goff can close the distance and make this more of a pocket type of fight, he'll be looking to push up against the cage. If he could land damage there as well, because I'm not sure exactly how much success he'll have with his takedowns with him getting the fight down to the mat. I think he needs to land damage in the clinch and just close the distance and make this an ugly fight. Okay, but that's the key to this matchup here. It's going to be the range. And I'll tell you what, on a card where I believe it's a very chalk-heavy type of event, I do favor a lot of the favorites throughout this fight card, and I know you guys don't like to see that. I'm going to lean towards Fugitt having enough success managing that distance and landing kicks from the outside that I will edge him out on a decision here. I'm going to say he wins a close one, but he wins even possibly a unanimous decision, taking 2 of the 3 rounds, or maybe this is a fight that goes to a split. Okay, but Fugitt is the dog here. We're seeing him right around plus 220, plus 230. If anyone's looking to put some money on that plus action on Fugitt, you can head over to BetUS. Real quick, this will give me a second to shout out my partners over at BetUS. If anyone's looking to sign up to a new sports book, reach out to me. Let me get you my referral link. You'll get a 150% match on your first 3 deposits. You guys can email me or shoot me a DM on IG or Twitter. Up next, we have 2 fighters that came off this recent season of Dana White's Contender Series. Mansur Abdul-Malik is taking on Nick Klein. Now, Abdul-Malik has already had an opportunity to step down into the octagon, and boy, did he look good. We called him getting that KO against Dusko Todorovic, a fighter from a completely different era of DWCS and a fighter that never really panned out. But the way Abdul-Malik went in there and finished him up was a very promising sign. I mean, this is a fighter that he's the whole package, okay? He has the wrestling background. Okay, if you don't realize, he has all different types of traditional martial arts that he's trained in. And besides that, he's game. Okay, he's very game. And on the other hand, you have a fighter in Nick Klein who seems to be more of a one-trick pony. He really likes that rear naked choke. You take a look at his past 3 victories, which led up to that rear naked choke that he landed on Geraldo Souza in just 37 seconds. He was the underdog in that match there. It was fun. Well, we got to see that take place, but I'm not so sure who Nick Klein is as a fighter. I'm not crazy about the striking I've seen from him. I'm also not crazy about how he looks when he's forced in a striking type of affair. Okay, when he's forced to really go at it on the feet and those grueling type of matches. You could pull up a fight where he took on Dorjan Dokaj. That was a fight where he broke down in the 3rd round. He was finished up there. I just feel that Mansur is a whole different type of animal compared to anything that Klein has faced thus far. And he has the grappling ability. That's the key here. He has the grappling and wrestling ability to keep this fight standing where he has a clear advantage. I think he's the much more dangerous striker. You see him listed with the 74-inch wingspan here. I see him listed on multiple other sites as having an 80-inch wingspan. So whether it's in the middle or not, and it probably is more towards that 80-inch mark when you take a look at the way he looks. Okay, so he's going to have a devastating range advantage. He's also much more athletic, and he's much more skilled and talented there. One question mark you could have had on Mansur not too long ago was we haven't seen him go past the first round. But in that match with Wes Schultz, where he got the contract on DWCS, and Schultz is a somewhat respected fighter on the regional scene, we saw him dig deep. Okay, that fight almost made it to the 3rd round. There was a lot of back and forth in it. He welcomed all of that action, and he looked to be breathing just fine in there. I think his cardio is going to really check out. I think he'll look fine late in fights. I think he's the whole package, and I think he's going to get a knockout on Nick Klein here. I don't think that Nick Klein's going to be able to hang with him on the feet. We are seeing Abdul-Malik as high as a minus 565 right now. Okay, he's an overwhelming favorite. Wouldn't be surprised if that line even continues to creep up. There's a reason why he's around a 5 to a 6 to 1 favorite. So if you're looking to bet this, maybe you throw him in a 2-team parlay, or you target him on that KO/TKO if you can get a decent tag there. And I'll just throw this out there. If Klein is going to get his hand raised in this fight, I think it's going to be by rear naked choke. I mean, that's one thing that he does pretty well. If this fight gets ugly, and even if Abdul-Malik is winning the fight, right, and he's dominating, if it gets a little sloppy, it could only take one mistake that Mansur could make, that where you could see Klein potentially get on his back and do what he does pretty well, which is find that rear naked choke. Okay, I find that to be an unlikely scenario, but I also just want to put everything on the table here and give all types of avenues this fight can go. We got the long-time Team Alpha Male product, Andre Fili, taking on Mel Costa. Fili comes into this fight off a very entertaining performance against Cub Swanson. In some people's eyes, the decision was controversial. By no stretch of the imagination was there any type of robbery that went on in that fight. I did have Cub Swanson winning it, but it was extremely close. It went to a split decision. It was a great fight. Okay, and the key note that we take away from that match is that Cub Swanson has still been looking great. Okay, he went out there in his last fight. He got the victory over Billy Q. I was there live in attendance. We cashed on that. That was an official play, and what a finish that was. All right, Cub Swanson, an older veteran that really is taking care of himself, and he's a high-level fighter. And we saw Andre Fili going tit for tat with him, and that was coming off that tough KO loss that he had against Dan Ige. Before that, he had a phenomenal KO for himself where he finished Lucas Almeida. So a lot of up and down type of performances coming by way of Fili. But one thing that is for certain is he's always game. He's well-rounded. And I think that this is a pretty good matchup for him here against Mel Costa. Mel Costa is not completely proven. He has 28 professional fights, right? But the vast majority of them coming outside the UFC. And since he's joined the UFC, there's really not one notable victory, okay? He defeated Austin Lingo via decision, and then he had that submission in his last fight against Shaolin Nurden-Beck. I'm not that high on him. There's not really a fighter that stands out. So you could talk about all these victories that he's had outside the UFC, okay, but it doesn't really do it for me. I understand when we break down his tape, we see he has a solid jiu-jitsu attack. He's very polished there, and his striking is decent. He's fluid, he's athletic. But I like Andre Fili in this spot, especially with where the odds are at. I just think that Fili has the takedown defense to potentially keep this fight standing, where I think he's just a little bit more game, wiry, and speedy with his striking. And I think that he can get the edge here on Mel Costa. So I feel more comfortable taking with the game veteran that has been in there with many big names and is just more weathered and proven. it's not out of the realm that Costa steps in here and finally gets that big victory under his belt. It's definitely possible. You take a look at the youth and all that, but I also like that 4-inch reach advantage that Fili has here. I want to see him keeping this fight a little bit more on the outside and just really look to keep this fight standing where he can outpoint Costa. If he gets caught up in one of those types of wars, you never know how it's going to go for Fili. He may get knocked out or he may knock you out. The betting line for this fight is set at dead even. Okay, currently it is -110 to -110, so pick your poison there. I feel more comfortable taking the veteran and Fili. Comment below who you guys have in this spot. Both fighters have a lot of pressure on them in this spot. Ricky Simón is taking on Javid Basharat. If Simón loses this fight, he would then be on a 4-fight losing skid. I really don't know what would be next for him. Maybe the UFC keeps him around to battle lower level fighters in the division. But this is a fighter that was once thought of to be a real contender. I mean, you think about him leading up to that Song Yadong fight. That was a main event spot. The winner of that fight was really creeping up in contention for fighting for the belt. And he gets finished up in the 5th round. And there's been a very similar narrative in his recent losses, and it's that his striking never really developed. Okay, we know he has good wrestling and good grappling, and he can push a great pace, but he never really put it all together like the current champ of this division, Merab Dvalishvili, has. And the reason why I bring up Merab is that he actually has a victory over him. If you guys remember, he got that submission with no time left in the fight. That was a crazy ending where he pulled off that wild guillotine choke on Merab, and the fight was essentially stopped as the bell rung and Merab was unconscious. But Merab, who has a similar type of style, was able to make it work and really to put it together. Simón has not. And when Ricky's fights are forced to take place on the feet, when you're talking about him fighting the higher level fighters in this division, it's just not going to go well for him. Okay, I mean, he's game. He'll bite down hard on the mouthpiece and he'll look to try to give it a run, but he will be technically outmatched. Okay, and we even saw that in his last fight against the recent UFC newcomer who's been on a tear, and Vinicius de Oliveira. De Oliveira was a dog there. We were on him to win that fight. So I've seen the writing on the wall for Simón to start to lose these types of matchups. And Javid is arguably another fighter that's going to give him some major problems there, because Javid's a very well-rounded fighter, and he can go out there and outpoint him and jab him up on the feet. I think that there's a clear path to victory in that type of affair. And I don't know if Simón's going to be able to go out there and just slam him down to the mat and dominate him down on the mat, because Javid, like I said, he's well-rounded. He has high-level BJJ. Even if he's taken down, I could see him working his way back up to the feet. Maybe we see some wild scrambles, and we even see Javid on top of him, passing guard and whatnot. But, you know, the elephant in the room was that last performance that Javid had, where he took that L against Ayman Sahabi. Go run my tape back on my prediction for that fight. Okay, go run it back. It's here on YouTube. I got the timestamps. If you guys remember, I said that line made absolutely no sense. I was leaning towards Basharat getting the victory, but Sahabi was like as high as a plus 500. That was one of the biggest underdog plays we've ever cashed. For everybody that rides with me, you guys got that sent out to you. You guys know what we're talking about here. All right, that line made 0 sense. All right, so even though I've been high on the potential that Basharat brings to this division, he hasn't proven enough. And you could still say the same thing after that fight, obviously, right? I thought he lost that fight. I thought that he did. I know some people thought that he deserved to win it. I mean, he was outstruck 75-67. Okay. The only control time we saw was Sahabi on top of him. He had 13 seconds of control time. Take that for what you will. Basharat was 0 for 4 on his takedowns, and he was outstruck by Ayman Sahabi, who's just an overlooked fighter, right? The brother of Faraz Sahabi. Now, I think it was a great learning experience for the young fighter who's just 29 in Javid, right? Leading up to his last 2 fights, he never really had any type of turbulence take place in the cage, right? He gets handed his first ever no contest, right? The point I'm making is the first time he steps into the cage, doesn't get his hand raised, right? And that last fight that took place before the Sahabi fight against Victor Henry, but he was clearly winning that fight, and it was stopped due to Henry. I believe it was the groin strikes where Henry just wanted nothing else to do with that fight. He knew he was being outclassed. Okay, so you had that take place. Then the Sahabi loss. I mean, these are the type of experiences that really are going to motivate a young fighter like Basharat. I think that he's going to outstrike Simón on the feet, and I just don't see him being smothered down in the mat. Now, I will say this. I am not in agreement with the line. I am not willing to cough up a minus 275 line on Javid here. But yeah, I'm having him getting his hand raised in this matchup, but Simón is still game. And although he's on this losing streak, he's only 32 years old. Okay, he's not near past his prime. And you want to talk about motivation. He knows he has to get his hand raised. I think that the value, without a doubt, is on Simón, who you can catch right around plus 211 or whatnot. I mean, he's over a 2-1 underdog here. All right, maybe this is a fight that plays out very closely. You want to have those plus odds on your side if you're betting this fight. Up at the 205s, we have the Baltic Gladiator, Modestas Bukauskas, taking on Raffael Cerqueira, who comes off a very disappointing UFC debut performance. Take a look at the numbers now. After that fight, he is absorbing 32.94 strikes per minute, right? And that fight took place for about 50 seconds, and Aslan put it on him. And what I really gathered from that fight, which I had question marks about him going into it, I was on the Aslan side, and Cerqueira closed as a slight favorite. The thing is that he's a can crusher. Okay, he was 11-0 coming into that Aslan fight. You take a look at the level of competition, it was very low, and there wasn't a lot of cage time. A lot of his fights ended early, and I was wondering how he was going to look if the fight went late. But another question mark we had was, how is he going to fare against a fighter that's the real deal? That's a UFC caliber fighter, right? When they bring that pressure, how is he going to fare there? And you saw he was very uncomfortable. He didn't have a lot of confidence. It's like as soon as that bell rung, he had his back up against the cage. He was circling it, and he really wanted nothing to do with going at it. And I think we could see something very similar here. Why should we have a lot of confidence that he's going to go out here in this matchup and all of a sudden be a much more confident fighter coming into it off the way that last fight just played out? Modestas Bukauskas, he's a game dude. You could say, yeah, he comes up short in the big matches, right? He takes L's against fighters like Khalil Roundtree, Vitor Petrino, which looks even worse these days. Okay, but we still understand that Petrino carries power. He caught him there in the second round. Came up short against Jimmy Crute, Michal Oleksiejczak. I mean, that 3-fight losing skid that he had there led to him getting cut by the UFC. But look how game he is, man. He goes back to the drawing board, gets a couple of regional victories over there in Cage Warriors, gets signed back to the UFC, defeats Zach Payuga. After the Vitor Petrino KO loss, he goes out there, he gets a submission victory over Marcin Prachnio. That fight was crazy. They went to war. If you guys don't remember how that fight played out, go run the tape back on that. That was a wild one. That was on the big UFC 304 fight card that was headlined by Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. But Bukauskas has been through adversity in the octagon before. Right? He's not a stranger to it, and he won't shy away from it. It won't make him cower. I have a lot more confidence that he pushes through any of the offensive onslaught that Raffael will throw his way compared to vice versa. All right. Now, I mean, we have to just highlight real quick that even though Raffael has been can crushing, he has shown fight ending ability. You take a look at his 11 victories, 10 of them came by way of finish, 8 of them were by way of KO. And you could pull up some of those highlights on YouTube, and he looks pretty good in some of them. But you just have to understand the level of competition there. I don't think he's going to do that to Bukauskas. One flaw you could say that Bukauskas has is he's a little plotty. He's a big fighter for the division, but he's a little flat-footed at times. We saw Khalil Roundtree kind of play with him and snap his leg back there. Can Raffael do something similar to that? And I don't necessarily mean hyperextend his leg with a tricky kick like that. I mean, just can he be a little bit more light on his feet and land some heavy shots on him and set up a KO? We've seen him knocked out 4 times, Bukauskas, out of his 6 losses. I'm going to say it's not out of the realm, especially in the light heavyweight division, but I feel much more confident backing the only 31-year-old Bukauskas. He's not even in his prime yet, okay? And he has a lot of experience to build off here. I like him to win this fight, and I'm going to say he finds a finish. I just don't think that Raffael knows how to be a nail at this point in time. He's 34. I don't think he'll ever really learn how to be the nail. That's what happens when you go out to the regional scene and you just crush all these cans and you don't really have any type of adversity. As far as any type of grappling that we'll see, I mean, Raffael hasn't shown anything there, but he trains with fighters like Jalton Almeida. Modestas is probably more proven there, and I think he'll be fine. If anything, I could see him being on top, maybe rain down some ground and pound. I do like the UFC established fighter in Bukauskas, who is right around a minus 345 in this spot. And I mean, you could say maybe that's a little high based on the fact that It's possible that Raffael just had a bad debut. The octagon jitters got him, and maybe he shows up more game here, and this is a fight that could play out more competitively. You can definitely argue that, and I probably will lean towards that way because the line's a little high when you're getting up to 3.5 to 1 odds. Man. But if I really had to pick, who do I feel more comfortable having that action on based on where the line is? I don't know, man. I still feel that I would rather have the money on Bukauskas. So maybe I'm kind of second guessing myself there. I'll say the value is on Bukauskas, even at a minus 345 line. I feel pretty confident that he's going to go out there and intimidate and just kind of be the bully in this fight and probably get that finish as well. We'll stay put in the light heavyweight division as we have Ion Cutelaba taking on Ibo Aslan. Aslan was the fighter we were just referring to that went out there and worked Cerqueira in that last match. Before that, Ibo Aslan had a big knockout victory in the 3rd round in his UFC debut against Anton Turkalj. And the reason why I say it was a big victory, of course, when it's your UFC debut, that's a big fight for you. But that was a redemption spot for him. The only man that ever defeated him throughout his career was Anton Turkalj. He submitted him in the 2nd round back in 2020 over at Brave, CF40. So, I mean, he's really been showing a lot of growth and development. He's young for this division. I think he's one of the more promising up-and-comers in the light heavyweight division. He had that big KO over Paulo Hanato Jr. on DWCS that led him to get the contract. That fight only lasted 2 minutes and 22 seconds, and he shows he could finish it quick in there. I think that it is likely he can get an early finish on Cutelaba. We've seen Cutelaba get finished up with strikes before early on in fights. Although Cutelaba does run to his wrestling pretty quickly, sometimes he chooses to slug it out, right? If you think about like the Ankalaev fights and both of those, I mean, he was very willing to go to war there. And if he does look to go to war with Aslan, I think that he will be outgunned. I think he will be KO'd. Cutelaba should look to change levels and test Aslan's wrestling abilities. If this fight goes to the later rounds, I mean, without a doubt, there's going to be shots taken on Aslan. My gut's telling me that he will be okay there. I think that even if he's taken down, we could see him work his way back up to his feet. As of recently, he's getting those later rounds clocked in, and we're seeing that development there, right? In that Anton fight, he gets submitted the first time around. In the rematch, he looks more polished and he's defending better. I think that he can defend the takedowns that Cutelaba throws his way, or at the very least, he'll build his way back up and he'll just be a step ahead on the feet. But more than anything, I think that there's a real likelihood he could land a damaging shot early on in this fight and get a stop. Cutelaba's always been kind of a funny personality. You think about him coming in with the green paint as the Hulk to the weigh-ins, but when you really dissect some of his recent performances, he never really continued to develop as a fighter. When you think back to how he kicked his UFC career off, battling with respectable names, whether he was winning or losing. And when he was losing, it was to high caliber fighters like Misha Cirkunov or Jared Cannonier, as Jared Cannonier was working his way down from the heavyweight to that light heavyweight down to the eventual middleweight division. I mean, it was respectable who he was losing against, right? Glover Teixeira subbed him, the 2 Magomed Ankalaev KOs. Well, he also mixed in victories over fighters like Khalil Roundtree, or he was knocking out Henrique de Silva in the first round. And it just kind of got worse and worse. Besides the one Tanner Bozier first round finish that he just had, it's been pretty ugly. He got finished by Kennedy and Shuku. Johnny Walker submitted him. Ryan Spann finished him up in the first round. I mean, it's been pretty ugly, even the decision loss that he had against Felipe Lin. So I just don't put a lot of confidence into him. And I think that Aslan will get the job done here and will prove to be a respectable fighter in this division. Let's take a look at where the line is for this fight. And we're going to see that Ibo Aslan is a minus 130 favorite. He's a slight favorite here. I like the value on the Turkish fighter. I think that he'll prove to defend that wrestling attack, and he'll be the more dangerous fighter. So I think the value is on Aslan. So I was just about to jump into the Macy Chiasson versus Ketlin Vieira fight. And breaking news, at least as I'm filming this, depending on when you're watching it, that fight is now scrapped from the card too. I mean, this fight card is in shambles. I feel really bad for anybody out in Seattle that has tickets for it. The UFC just announces 2 new matches on the card. We're jumping into one here in Nursulton Ruziboev, who's taking on Eric McConico. We'll get to that next newly added match in the next segment. I'll give you a sneak peek. neither of them are showstoppers, okay? Ruziboev is coming off of that Joaquin Buckley loss. That fight took place down in the welterweight division. This fight is up in the middleweight division, and McConico is a fighter that has fought in the light heavyweight division. They're meeting in the middle, but to put things into perspective, I actually feel that this is the division that both fighters should be fighting in. Okay, I don't think McConico is going to hold his own up in the light heavyweight division with UFC caliber type of fighters. He's not really a big light heavyweight. And Ruziboev, I don't know how he was ever making 170. It still baffles me. I mean, take a look at the frame. He's the fighter, even though he's coming up, he's the fighter that is 6'5". He has a 5-inch height advantage, or he's 5 inches taller, depending on how you look at that there. He's the fighter that has a 1-inch reach advantage. He has a 76-inch wingspan. Isn't that fun? It's funny to think about it like that. So, I mean, here's the thing. Eric McConico, we don't have an age listed for him here, but he's not a young fighter. He's been around the block for quite some time. He made his combat debut as an amateur against Austin Vanderford way back in 2015. You could pull that full fight up on YouTube. And he defended some early takedowns, or he defended an early takedown. And then on the second attempt, he was quickly taken down and dominated there. About 7 amateur fights before turning pro. So he has more experience than some of you would think at just 11 pro fights. He's been around the block. He's an MMA lab product. I know back in the day, he's put in some work over at American Top Team. And there's just really not a lot of big fights that are going to stand out to you on his resume. Probably the biggest one is going to be a Maki Pitolo TKO finish over there, and tough enough. Maki Pitolo, a UFC fighter that never really was able to cut it. He's been finishing some fights, but I'm just not crazy about the level of competition. He was scheduled to fight Randall Wallace on February 14th. So he was training for a fight. He's not coming off the couch. This is just a different level opponent here. Ruziboev wasn't training for a fight, but I'll take a Ruziboev off the couch any day. He was supposed to face off with Rinat Fakhretdinov back in October of last year. Haven't really heard much from him since then. And like I said, I mean, he could just wake up, jump out of bed, and I'm going to still have him over a McConico just from what I've seen. Ruziboev, that loss that he took to Buckley, it went to a decision. It doesn't look that bad. I mean, Buckley's going out there defeating everybody. I think Ruziboev shows plus power. He's unorthodox. He can crack. And if I have to pick a way that this fight goes, I'm going to say that the awkwardness of Ruziboev, along with the comfortability of him in the octagon, will lead to him landing some big shots and McConico being finished up. We'll see if he can catch Ruziboev coming in, if he's too overly aggressive, but I just don't see it. He's had 4 KOs. He's also had a couple subs. I don't think he's going to be able to exploit Ruziboev's grappling. I think Ruziboev is going to be a clear step ahead. I don't have a betting line for this fight, but I expect Ruzi to come in maybe around a 3-1 favorite, 4-1 favorite. It could be one of those types of lines that skyrockets. We'll see. These are always fun when I got to give a prediction without any type of betting line, but I feel very confident that the already UFC established fight finisher Nursulton will be the favorite here. It's hard to say if we're going to have value depending on how high that line goes. I wouldn't go crazy with it, but he should get the job done, and I'll say he gets a finish. So with all these fights falling apart on the card, it opens up an opportunity for the juice box, Julius Walker, to take on a proven UFC gladiator, Alonzo Menifield. Menifield made his way into the UFC from a very early season of Dana White's Contender Series. He's proven to be a fight finisher. He has plus power. Okay, he's coming off a couple of losses. And in fact, he was knocked out in both of them. And now he's 37 years old. Okay, so that makes this matchup a little bit more interesting. But Julius Walker, he's 6-0, just 25. If I'm being honest, I don't really look at him near being a blue chip prospect. You guys see me throw that term around often, and I'm not going to throw it around here. I don't think that he's a highly regarded prospect. He shows some talent. Although he is 6-0, he took a fair share of losses as an amateur, and there's some questionable losses mixed in here. Okay, I don't like to see that pro or amateur. It's not really the greatest sign as far as getting thrown in there with the fighter like Menifield. I mean, he was taking losses not too long ago as well. I mean, these were 4 years ago or so, but have we seen that type of development to lead him up to this opportunity right now? I mean, it's a quick jump. Also, you take a look at the Niall Bartling matchup that he had there. He did win that fight via second round sub. If you guys remember, Bartling, he fought on the Ultimate Fighter. He brought in some wrestling ability. Bartling was winning that fight up until the point that choke came in. I mean, the fight ended in the beginning of the second round, so you could say, hey, he was winning a round. But, I mean, he really was having success with his wrestling. He was on top. I could see Menifield kind of replicating some of that. I could see Menifield being the fighter that's on top, using his wrestling skills and mass to get on top there and land some nasty ground and pound. And then, the Bevon Lewis fight, that was the fight that he just had second to most recent. Bevon Lewis was a fighter that fought on DWCS, but you take a look at his resume, he just has loss after loss after loss, and that was a fight. It did end in the first round, but I'm not crazy about the movement that I see from the UFC debutant here in Julius Walker, and we'll see how his career goes. He's very young, and maybe down the line, I'm eating my words here. This could be one of those types of segments where if you run it back, 3-4 years down the line, I sound comical, right? Maybe he proves to be a solid UFC caliber fighter. I just think that he's going to have a full plate in front of him. I don't think he's going to be able to finish it off here. I think that Menifield is going to be very hungry to bounce back with the victory coming into this off the 2 losses. And although he's 37, he is a physical specimen. You take all that veteranship, all the experience he has, I think that he gets the W here. I expect him to be a big favorite. I don't have a line in this fight as well. I think that he could find a finish in this fight. I mean, that's what Menifield does. You take a look at out of his 15 victories, he has 7 KOs in the first round, 2 other KOs in the second round. I mean, he's a fight finisher. He's shown some submission abilities as well. Only 2 of his victories have gone to a decision. So I will say the 8-5 UFC fighter here, the proven veteran, gets the job done. And I will say that he gets it done via TKO. Hey guys, just want to give a special thank you to everyone that's tuned in and listening to the show. Appreciate you guys greatly. Please smash that like button and subscribe if you're new. Without a doubt, one of my most anticipated fights of the card in the featherweight division, we have Gene Silva taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan. This is a striker's delight. I like the matchmaking that was done here. Gene Silva has burst on the scene in the UFC. You're not going to be able to get him at underdog odds like you were able to get against Charles Jourdain or against Drew Dober. Okay, we'll get to the betting line here in a second, but now this is a fighter that's going to have that big old minus next to his name, as he does in this matchup. He's coming off that 3rd round KO over Drew Dober. He finished up Charles Jourdain. He finished up Weston Wilson. At the time of him going in there and outclassing Weston Wilson, a lot of us just kind of looked at that fight like, oh, okay, he did what he should have done. Weston Wilson is a fighter that not a lot of us believe to be UFC caliber, and the book really wasn't out on who Gene Silva is or was. And now we all feel pretty damn confident that this is one of the most talented fighters coming up in this division. He's electrifying on the feet. He's silky smooth there. He can go out there. He can knock you out. He'll switch stances on you. He's undersized for this division as far as from a length standpoint, but he's very compact. He's physically strong. Just because he's a smaller fighter, don't think that he's going to go out there and get muscled around. Okay, but it is good to see from Melsik's standpoint that he's a fighter that brings in a nice solid 3-inch reach advantage. He's a couple inches taller. That could be good for him here. Okay, because he's a dangerous kickboxer, and if he uses that range from the outside, he could potentially have some success there. Melsik, we've seen him make some blatant errors in there. You take a look at that loss that he had against Joshua Kulibau. He got submitted in the second round via rear naked choke, but he did bounce back with the Lutz victory. Not a lot of big names on his resume. You think about when he went out there and defeated Dennis Bazooka on DWCS and got the contract, and he definitely showed talent with his kickboxing. He mixes it all up. He'll drop elbows on you. He throws nasty straights. I don't know how complete of a fighter he is. I know he's working on that. But in a straight up stand-up type of match, like this probably will be, because Silva really welcomes those types of fights, I think that he's more alive than the line says, or than from what I'm seeing online. I really do. If this fight takes place straight up on the feet, I think Melsik can somewhat hold his own. I think that he'll still be a little bit of a step behind, and if we see a KO, it's more likely that Silva's knocking him out, although he may land his own shot. He's dangerous, man. I'm telling you, he puts big power into his strikes, and he's diverse with his attack. But yes, it is Silva that's more likely to get the KO here, and even if it goes to the judges' scorecards, it is Silva that should be outlanding Melsik, and he should just be more of the game competitor from what we've seen from both these fighters in the cage. So I will pick Gene Silva to get the job done here. And how do I not pick him to get the KO? I mean, that's what he just keeps going out there and doing. I'll say he gets the knockout, but don't be surprised if this fight plays out a little bit closer than what you think it would be, and if it's an entertaining fight and goes to the judges' scorecards and we see a lot of back and forth type of action. This is a good matchup for Melsik, okay, stylistically. All right, let's take a look at the odds, and these were the old odds we were seeing again. Plus 115 against Jourdain. He closed at minus 115 against Dober, but he was a dog early on in the fight week. And right now, we are seeing Gene Silva as high as a minus 485. Okay, we're seeing a lot of action coming at him. You might want to be careful there. You might want to pump the brakes. You should not be coughing up 5-1 odds on him against Melsik, who's dangerous there as well. It's just, I don't see a lot of value in it. I see more value in the dog. This could easily be a fight that we're talking about on the Prop Edition video, but give me Gene Silva to win this fight via KO when it's all said and done. We got ranked 185ers set to square off in a rematch. It's Brendan Allen that's looking for redemption against Anthony Hernandez. These two men fought back, I think it was in 2018 over in the LFA, and Hernandez was, I would say, clearly a step ahead, although the fight was somewhat competitive. We saw Hernandez getting the better of the striking on the feet. We saw him getting the better of the grappling exchanges. Allen is still a talented fighter, and it's kind of crazy when you think about the fact he's still 29 years old. He hasn't even cracked the 30 marker. We kind of look at him as like a veteran of the sport, right? When you think of how long ago it was that he fought on Dana White's Contender Series, and now he has some wars under his belt. He came up short against Nasruddin Imavov in that last fight, but we know Imavov is the truth, and he's pushing his way towards a title shot. Before that, he went to war with Chris Curtis. The thing I will say is I loved the fighting spirit that he showed. He finished very strong, but throughout that fight, he was landed on, and he went through adversity. Also, the first time he fought Curtis back in 2021, he was KO'd. I mean, we have seen him take damage in his fights. That's one thing I worry about when you talk about Allen. Yeah, he's really tough, and he'll look to push through it, but he is vulnerable defensively at times. And Anthony Hernandez is just such a tough fighter. He's so fluid offensively and defensively. He could take everything you throw at him. So that's the issue here. It's going to be really hard for Allen to go out there and to get redemption here, for him to make this fight play out differently than the last fight. Now, yeah, it may play out differently in the sense that he gets finished. I see that more likely being the case. But no matter how you spin it, I see Hernandez being a step ahead. And in fact, I will lean towards Hernandez finding a finish in this fight. I know this is just a 3-rounder, but these men have already been in there for 25 minutes. There shouldn't be too much of a feeling out process. I think they go right at it. And Hernandez, as of recently, has been finding that finish before the end of the third round. You take a look at the Roman Kopylov fight, the Edmund Shabazian fight, the Marc-Andre Barriault fight. Yeah, it took him to the fifth to break down Michel Pereira, but I mean, he's been finishing fights, and I just think that he's going to find something here. I think he's going to land some big shots on Allen, and I don't know if I'm banking on Allen to push through the adversity like he typically does. He plays with fire there. I mean, I will say this, Allen is a very technical fighter, especially down in the mat. He has solid BJJ. He hangs around with the best of them. He surrounds himself with the top fighters in the game, trains over there at Team Killcliff FC. I just don't see what he's going to do here to shake things up and change the outcome of this fight. I'm not the biggest fan of his striking. I think Hernandez has a clear advantage there. And it's not even that Hernandez is the most technical fighter, but he brings in a real X factor there. He's just very relaxed, and he's kind of almost has that street fighting type of style, if you guys know what I'm saying. I mean, he'll stick his tongue out at you. He has a granite chin, and he's willing to just let it all fly. And I think that he will be a clear step ahead. Now, the money line on Hernandez is right around a minus 285. May seem a little high to some of you guys based on who Brendan Allen is as a fighter, but we've already seen these two men in there. And for Allen to go in there and get the job done, I think he does need to find a finish. And Hernandez is not easy to be finished. Okay, you could bring up the Holland KO loss that he took, but besides that, he could eat a shot almost better than anybody that we've seen. I think that was more of a fluke there. I mean, I've seen him take some flush strikes to the face, and he walks right through them. He's not really easy to be subbed as well. I don't think that Allen will pull that off. Maybe he can get on his back and shake things up like that. But I think Hernandez is somewhat of a safe play here, and I think that this line is pretty accurate. I think Hernandez wins this fight, and I think that he finds a finish before that final bell rings. And then in the main event, we have the return of Triple C. Henry Cejudo will be facing off with Song Yadong. It's crazy to think that Cejudo retired from the sport not that long ago. And in retrospect, I think it's kind of safe to say he probably should have just left the gloves hung up, because we would have looked at him in a completely different light, right? He makes his return back to the cage and he goes 0-2. Although I thought he defeated Aljamain Sterling. That fight was very close, but in a lot of people's eyes, he won that fight. Now, the fight against Merab, he got ragdolled in that, although Merab is the reigning bantamweight champion who, like I said earlier in the video, probably is the greatest bantamweight fighter we've ever seen. Okay, so maybe don't put him under the magnifying glass too much for those 2 losses. He's really not a fighter that you want to count out. If you guys remember how the Demetrius Johnson rematch went, he went out there and shook the fighting world up. He was a massive underdog, and he squeaked by using his wrestling, and he took out a legend of the sport. He defeated TJ Dillashaw. When Dillashaw came down to the flyweight division, he knocked him out in just 32 seconds. I mean, he had some really big victories back then. Even when you take a look at the Sergio Pettis W, that aged very well, as even though Pettis left the UFC, he's a very respectable opponent. The Cruz KO. No, I mean, he's a game dude, man. Cejudo is a very game fighter. Of course, he's an Olympic gold medalist. He's a 2-division UFC champion. That's hence the name Triple C. But he really has his back up against the wall here, man. He's 11 years older than Song. He's 38. That's very old for this division. Song Yadong is just 27. He's still cruising into his prime. He's getting better and better. And although he does come off that loss against Petr Yan, I think that this is a real good bounce back spot for him. This fight really reeks of the Weili Zhang versus Tatiana Suarez fight, right? Well, I mean, it may not be the best comparison, because Henry is a better striker than Suarez shows to be. Suarez is much more one-dimensional. But if Henry Cejudo struggles to get the takedowns throughout this fight, I do expect Song to be the better striker. Song is just, he's much larger. And you take a look at the difference in frame, man. He has a 3-inch reach advantage. He's 4 inches taller. I don't know why, man. I'm having a hard time seeing Cejudo rinse and repeat the takedowns. And although he may be able to do it a little bit early on, maybe he squeaks off a round or 2, I have this gut feeling that Song's going to land some nasty strikes on the feet using that large frame and just that speed that he has there. He's so technical. I have to lean towards Song's way. I think that he gets the job done here. Does he get Cejudo out of there, in my opinion? I think that's more of the question. Cejudo's only been finished once before, and that was in that first fight against Demetrius Johnson, right, where he ate all those knees in the clinch and just got worked there. He was a completely different fighter back then. He was the wrestler that was learning the whole MMA thing out. But now the difference is, even though he's a more seasoned and matured fighter, the difference is that he's 38. How is he going to take these big strikes for 25 minutes? I'm going to lean towards him going to a decision and not getting finished. He's a tough dude, and I will lean towards that way, but I could expect to see him bloodied up. And I will also say he wins at least a round or 2 in this fight, and he'll get some takedowns. I just don't think that'll be enough for him to win round to round to round, or at least to take 3 of them. So I will say that Song Yadong wins this fight via unanimous decision. And we'll take a look at the odds here. Yadong Song is now a -265. A lot of action's been coming in on him. He opened up right around a 2-1 favorite, right around a -200. So action's coming in on him. And we'll see. I think that line's getting a little out of hand. I don't see a lot of value on that. Like I said earlier in the segment, don't completely overlook Triple C. He is as game as it comes, and his back is up against the wall. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Got to leave you guys with some quick parting words. Make sure you guys count your blessings. Life's short, and sometimes you have some adversity come through your life, and you get through it, and maybe you kind of forget some of that adversity that you went through. Remember, guys, always appreciate going through it and getting to the other side. You never know when it could circle back. So when you have your health going for you, or any type of happiness you have, make sure that you take a second to stop and appreciate it. Because I can think of some examples even in my own life where you think things are all good. You take it for granted going through some of the adversity you went through, and you kind of get caught in cruise control, and then some of that stuff circles back to you. and then you're saying, oh man, you know, why wasn't I really appreciating it as much as I should have? Sometimes it feels good, man, when things are going good, to just sit back, take a nice deep breath, and count your blessings and appreciate how good things are going. All right. So if things are going smooth for you right now, if you got smooth sailing, take a second to appreciate it and maybe give a little thank you to someone out there.
The teller. The teller. The teller.